На Чернобыльской атомной электростанции произошла авария. Поврежден один из атомных реакторов. Принимаются меры по ликвидации последствий аварии. Пострадавшим оказывается помощь. Создана правительственная комиссия.
Today marks the 35th anniversary of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. I want to share my recollections of the disaster back in 1986. Now, when I first heard about the nuclear accident, it was either on breakfast television or in a school classroom. My big memories, though, are in being in a school classroom. I can actually remember the classroom I was in, and I think it was a French lesson, some kind of language lesson. I do remember a map being dragged out and saying, here's where the Soviet Union is, here's where the United Kingdom is. I don't think anybody was quite sure where the Chernobyl reactor, Pripyat, was. You wouldn't have any notice, and it was probably quite secret at the time. But as the news got to the West, we started having news reports on British television, on the news. And I've got to remember being extremely terrified about, the radiation that could come from the reactor and the repercussions to the UK. It was a really frightening time.
Good evening. Radioactive fallout from the Soviet nuclear accident has reached Britain. Raised radiation levels were detected in the south of England as far west as Oxfordshire. The National Radiological Protection Board say concentrations of radioactive material are very low and people in the United Kingdom won't be placed at risk. Soviet television tonight accused the Western media of spreading slanderous inventions about the Chernobyl accident.
In my reflection, it's quite interesting because a few weeks ago I watched the Ben Fogle TV documentary, Ben Fogle in Chernobyl, which rhymes. And it was a fantastic documentary, and I would really recommend anybody who's an interest in Chernobyl or nature watches it, or even engineering watches it. It's quite a long documentary, and he visits Chernobyl. He actually goes into the reactor for a few minutes, and it has to be a few minutes because it's so radioactive still. It's a really excellent documentary. At the end of the programme, he actually talks about the rewilding of the radioactive exclusion zone and how nature's recovered not just the urban environment, but also species have thrived because there's no human contact. There's hardly anybody there. So I would really recommend it. In reading recently, it is still terrifying what happened. There's still strontium-90 present. Some of the radioactive isotopes have a half-life of 30 years, so the area is extremely, extremely hazardous. But as Ben Fogle says in the documentary, one of the very few positive things to come out of the accident is that the international community have grouped together to build the new confinement facility of the old crumbling sarcophagus, which was quite hastily constructed. So if you're interested in the subject, I would recommend the Ben Fogle Channel 5 documentary. You'll be able to get it on Catch Up in the UK. I'm not sure if you're watching this overseas, out of the UK, where you can watch it. But it's on Channel 5 in the UK, and it's a fascinating watch, especially for me, as Ben Fogle's a similar age to me. So I had a similar experience being at school around the same time, and the fears that were amongst, I think most of us, I think all of us at the time. It was a particularly frightening part of my life, and we all thought that food would be banned, and it was extremely frightening. As it's still frightening, it's still a particularly hazardous area. To bookmark the Ben Fogle documentary, I would really recommend a YouTube vlogger called Bald and Bankrupt. He's a British chap, and he visits Pripyat, the abandoned town next to Chernobyl, on an official tour, but also he visits independently some of the people in Belarus, in the Belarusian nuclear zone, who are still living there. It's all done in a very respectful sort of way. As with all Bald and Bankrupt's videos, it's all about the people who live there and their experiences. Now, one interesting thing, he does befriend this old chap who's not in the best of health. He lives in this house, this little wooden house, there's no electricity. He actually revisits and takes him food. Then on the next visit, he takes him to a supermarket. So it's quite heartwarming how, you know, somebody from the UK supported somebody from Belarus who's still in the radioactive exclusion zone. Out of interest, Bald and Bankrupt had some T-shirts printed, and the money he made from them he actually gave to this Belarusian chap, which it was a nice story. Whilst the Chernobyl TV series was a drama, it's fantastic. It's one of the best things I've watched on TV for many years. The acting's superb. As for historic accuracy, yes, it is a drama. But I'll not spoil it, but the way they tell the story of the scientific community is absolute genius. It's a recommended watch. It's pretty harrowing. It's very distressing, just to warn you all. But it's a fantastic, fantastic watch and recommended if you're interested in the subject. What I don't like, however, are some videos on YouTube where people have sneaked into Pripyat and entered extremely radioactive areas. I'm not going to mention the YouTube channel because I don't want to publicise the guy. I've never met him. I will never meet him, probably. But there's one YouTube channel. It's a British guy, and the main accident and emergency hospital where all the brave people dealing with a nuclear accident were taken. Many of them died. All their PPE, all their clothing was taken off, and it was that radioactive. It was thrown in the cellar. Now, interestingly, in the Ben Fogel TV documentary, they've actually filled in the entrance to the cellar with sand because people were going in. And there's one YouTube video, and this guy from Britain, I've got to say his PPE must have been from B&Q or another DIY store. So he's got a paper suit on, he's wrapped some bin liners around his boots, he's put some kind of face mask on, but he's got a fabric rucksack, and he's going into an area that is extremely radioactive. Now, in the Fogel documentary, it says one of the reasons why we're not in there, because you're not allowed in there anymore, is because the dust is that radioactive. And this idiot goes in, obviously stirring up all this highly radioactive dust, putting his radiation meter next to some poor firefighter's discarded boot, and going, look at the radiation level off that, it's off the scale. And it's ridiculous, it really is. It's so irresponsible. What worries me is all the dust stirred up, and okay, he's got the disposable overalls on, but what's he going to do with the overalls? The fabric rucksack will probably have radioactive dust particles that have been stirred up. He's going to be walking around back to the hotel or back on flights or whatever with that on. So I think it's really irresponsible. It's not something I would. Yes, I've watched it, I've interest, but I wouldn't recommend watching it. What I will finish this video off by saying is just the human tragedy behind the accident and the environmental tragedy as well. I think the Soviet government at the time come out of this in a very poor light. It was several days before they acknowledged that there was a nuclear accident. But I want to end this video by, paying tribute to all the heroic men and women of the former Soviet Union who helped deal with this disaster, not just then, but now. It's still a highly toxic radioactive area. When we think about the liquidators on the roof of the reactors shoveling the material off the side of the roof, when we think about the brave firefighters, the medical staff who receive people with terrible, fatal and other long-term radioactive injuries, it is just such a big human tragedy. It beggars belief. So thanks very much for watching. I hope we reflect 35 years later on the terrible human cost of Chernobyl, and let's hope something like this never happens again.